Welcome to Mary's Eclectic Interests. I'm Sue Ellen Zagrobelny, your host. Our guest today is Elizabeth Irish. She is the writer and host of Murdering the Classics. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about how you got started in this rather interesting venture.
Purely by accident, actually. The first is that I am an unabashed bookworm. I have been reading since I was 4 years old and loved exploring different books, different genres. I was never without 2 or 3 books that I was reading. At the same time, when I was a teenager, I started buying with my friends those kits you used to be able to get in game stores, How to Host a Murder, Murder a la carte, where you would get together, come in character, and try to solve a murder. But by the time I was in college, I couldn't afford the kits anymore. At the same time, I had just made all of my friends read Pride and Prejudice and just watched the Colin Firth version of Pride and Prejudice. And so I thought that that it would be fun to actually try to solve the murder of Mr. Darcy. So I wrote a murder mystery. We killed Mr. Darcy. All of my friends got to pick whatever character they wanted to come as. We dragged out our old prom dresses, chipped in for snacks, and sat around in our dorm common room trying to piece together who murdered Mr. Darcy. And I believe afterwards we all went out for a Lollapalooza Sunday to split in our prom dresses at the local ice cream parlor.
What made you choose the classics?
The first ones were just my friends all wanted to adapt their favorite books. I think the second one after Pride and Prejudice, my friend wanted to adapt Gone with the Wind, which is not in public domain, but it was just us people in college doing it. So I did that one, then someone wanted to do The Great Gatsby, and then someone wanted to do The Odyssey, mostly because I think we all thought togas would be kind of fun. And so I took requests, and then as I started doing more and I graduated college and started traveling and I always had books on me and I always had a legal pad where I was scribbling down ideas, books that just struck my fancy, books that had interesting characters and characters that I wanted to know more about, characters that sometimes I wondered about. Did they have a dark secret somewhere?
You mentioned public domain.
Yes.
How do you manage copyright issues?
When I first started selling kits or hosting events, I knew I wanted to be very careful not to improperly use someone else's material, something that was still under copyright. So I spent some time researching copyright laws. We're actually at a very interesting point in copyright protection in this country right now because in 1998 they extended copyright for 20 years. So this year in 2018, is the first year new works are coming back into the public domain. But I made sure that things were always published and in the public domain, both by looking at the Library of Congress website and then also checking on Gutenberg.com or using my Gutenberg app on my iPad, because they actually will publish electronically for free books in the public domain, and they're very strict about what they use and don't use. So I make sure on 2 fronts that the work is in the public domain before I ever sell a kit for it or host an event.
That's a really good policy, and it protects you and protects your guests.
Absolutely. And protects the authors and their heirs as well. I would not want to in any way, shape, or form infringe upon someone else's creativity or their livelihood.
Yes, any more than you'd want anyone to infringe on your livelihood.
Absolutely.
Murdering the Classics is a kit, an event? Tell me.
Both. I wrote a bunch of these for my friends over the years and then at some point started selling them. And people can obtain the kit and host it however they want. I have been hired to help host many of these, and we have hosted them in my home if I know the people, in restaurants, in common areas of apartments. We did one in a common area of a senior center once, which was a lot of fun. We actually developed quite an audience, I think, at the end of that one. I think I've said restaurants. I'm gauging interest right now with a local intimate apparel store that was interested in hosting an event for the murder of Aphrodite and actually having an event in their store, which I think would be a lot of fun. But pretty much anywhere you want to host it. It can be formal, it can be informal. It's whatever the host in the end feels comfortable with.
Can you tell us about some of the plays or stories you have adapted?
They're all over the board. Ones that I've adapted, including ones from my friends, have been the Odyssey. I've done the Greek gods and the Greek goddesses. I've done 2 Jane Austen novels. I think I mentioned I was a pretty big fan of hers. I've done Dickens' Great Expectations. I have done The Mysteries of Udolpho, which very few people have heard of, but I enjoyed. I've done some history, murder mysteries as well. I had a divorce support group once who wanted a murder mystery where what they said was they wanted a murder mystery game that no one would want to be married at the end of. So we murdered Henry VIII. We had his 6 wives and 2 mistresses come. So we've done that historically. I've done just finishing the murder of Marie Antoinette and the War of the Roses. All over the board. Some Shakespeare. I'm looking at doing some other novels too. With my friends, I think I've done about 40 or 50 novels if I count the ones I've done with my friends. So I'm always finding different novels to do.
Is there anything specific that informs you what to do, or is it just that you're picking your favorites?
Mostly I'm picking my favorites. I do occasionally get people who request a novel. More often than not, it's a bit like the one group I did for Henry VIII, where they say, I want something that's sort of like this, or I'd like to do something French, or I am really interested in this particular area. And then I'll find a novel that will work with it. But occasionally, someone will ask for a specific novel that they want to adapt. I believe I've done a couple like that, actually.
Mm-hmm. After you've decided which classic to adapt into a murder mystery, how do you decide which characters to use?
Well, the first is to figure out who I'm going to kill, and that's sometimes very obvious. For instance, Mr. Darcy, because we were all madly in love with him back in college. Or the Odyssey, Odysseus was the very obvious choice. Once I figured out who is going to die, the characters usually just leap out at me. Who is the most tied to the character? Who might have had a secret reason for wanting them to die, or wanting them to die then or in that way. Almost more intuitive than anything else.
Which classic do you think adapted most easily?
For me to write, Pride and Prejudice certainly adapted the most easily for me. I'd read the book a number of times. I knew it backwards and forwards. I felt like I knew all of the characters very intimately, so it was very easy for me to write.
What seemed to be your guest's favorite story?
Wow, that is difficult sometimes because each guest looks for something different. I think the murder of Aphrodite, she is murdered by chocolate, accidentally given to her by the Mayan goddess of chocolate. Tends to be a favorite, in part just because we tend to have a big chocolate feast and festival when we host that one. Most people do that. And that tends to be very, very silly. The murder of Jacob Grimm is always a lot of fun for people because it's familiar fairy tales with a twist, and I think that people enjoy that very much too.
You told me something earlier about the setting that people did the murder of Jacob Grimm. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, one of my all-time favorite events that I've ever been to was someone had a Halloween party with the murder of Jacob Grimm, and all the villainesses came, and they had a big bonfire in their yard, and they roasted hot dogs, and they made s'mores, and they solved the murder of Jacob Grimm. And that was just such a neat and unique experience with that. I also had another experience with Jacob Grimm where, again, it was a different group of people who came, and the woman who was the witch from Hansel and Gretel had trouble putting together her costume. So she dressed up her granddaughter, who was 6 months old, and put a big sign saying snack on her. because that, of course, that's the witch that tries to eat Hansel and Gretel. So that was her costume, was her 6-month-old granddaughter with a big sign, snack.
Oh, how wonderful.
It was creative and fun, and it really was. It loosened up the party instantly with that. So.
Oh, that's fabulous. Elizabeth, can you tell me which of your novels that you've adapted is your favorite?
Wow. Pride and Prejudice will always have a special spot in my heart, just because it was the first one I did, and I'm such a huge Jane Austen nut. But in all honesty, I think my favorite is The Little-Known Mysteries of Udolpho, which almost nobody has read, but it was the smash hit bestseller of 1795. If you can believe that. It sold tons of copy. It was the inspiration for Edgar Allan Poe in A Telltale Heart, and for Bram Stoker in Dracula, for Emily Bronte in Wuthering Heights. Jane Austen herself parodied it in Northanger Abbey. And eventually I went back and read the book, and it absolutely offended me that there was a murder in the middle of the book that no one bothered to solve because everyone hated the guy who was murdered so much. So I had a wonderful time going back and actually trying to use the clues in the book to solve the murder that Anne Radcliffe, the author, had not bothered to solve in the novel. And it's a few thousand pages long, and not, I think, very easy for a modern reader to read. But knowing that it was the inspiration for so many great works of literature, I just had to read it. And I loved getting a chance to solve the murder in the novel.
And that is available?
It is
in
available.
An event?
It's available as an event. And if you're ever interested in the original Floozy French maid, or the Harlequin hero with the sword and the shirt cut down to his navel, that's where they came from. Those were the original stock characters for romance novels.
Oh, how fun. The original bodice rippers, maybe?
Maybe. They were definitely, there's definitely a lot of similarity for that novel. And like I said, I had a great time. Maybe it's my own sense of I want to know what happened, but it really bothered me reading that book and realizing no one bothered to solve this this terrible man's murder. But I wanted to solve it.
What was the most difficult one to portray, and then if you'd answer the question about for your guests to work through?
That is the same answer for both, and that was The War of the Roses, which is a historical murder mystery based on the English War of the Roses in the 1400s and the murder of the kingmaker's daughter. It was difficult because even though I was a history major and I was intimately familiar with that era of British history, most people are not. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of murders in that particular Civil War leading up to it. And there isn't really a good novel to read that would encompass the entire event. I mean, some people are familiar with Shakespeare's Henry plays. Some people are familiar with having watched The White Queen, or even the Game of Thrones, which is loosely based on the War of the Roses. So that was difficult to write, and it is intimidating when people come to it. The difficult part in writing is making sure that when people attend, within the first few minutes, they're able to piece together who everybody is and not be confused and not be overwhelmed. I will say that the most guests have said that within about 10, 15 minutes, they know who everybody is, but it was difficult to write. And for the guests, I think at first it's just very intimidating. It's a different era of history that we're not particularly familiar with in America, and there isn't a really good cheater television show or novel to read that would explain it to you. But it is a lot of fun, I will say that much. And for people who are interested in Renaissance festivals, that tends to be a pretty big hit.
That sounds like fun. I know some Renfest folks that would have a blast with that.
Great chance to use those costumes.
Oh, yes. How is it for people coming if they haven't read the novels?
I have always worked very hard to make sure that even if you come in cold, knowing nothing about the novels, you can still have a great deal of fun. You'll still know a little bit about your character and how your character was related to the person who was killed. You'll be able, within the first few minutes, to figure out where everyone fits in the story and why you might have wanted to kill the main character. I'll honestly say I've done a few of these where some of the guests have read the novel and some haven't, and some of the ones who haven't read the novel have gone home and read the novel. It does tend to get people interested at least a little bit in it, but you do not have to have read the novel to enjoy a fun event.
Do you yourself dress to reflect the evening?
Almost always I dress to reflect the evening, unless I am specifically at an event where they have asked not to dress. But I absolutely will try to do something in keeping with the character. Now, generally speaking, if I'm the host, I'm not coming as one of the characters who's accusing. I'm coming as Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who has summoned everyone here, or the goddess of justice Themis, who has summoned all the gods. But I think it adds something to it to dress up to get into character.
Do people come in costume, do you know?
Frequently they come in costume. Some people who have just gotten a kit and I wasn't involved have sent me pictures, and when I host, most frequently people do come in costume. And there are some definitely creative costumes that I have seen put together. It adds to the fun, really.
It must. It must.
Really does.
Do people ask how to make the event more authentic, say with food?
Sometimes, frequently actually, people will email me. Anytime anyone contacts me about hosting an event, I'm always available via email for suggestions. Many people do write and ask for ideas for food that would have been typical for that time or place. I'm always happy to talk through it. I do a lot of research on how to make food or China or whatever more authentic and more fitting for the particular event.
If you're hosting the event, do you tend to have things that are appropriate to the time frame?
Well, I don't have a licensed kitchen, so I'm not allowed to cater for the particular event. I send them links to allrecipes.com. Sometimes if they're in the Twin Cities area, I will actually even go over and help get things set up to make sure everything goes smoothly.
Could you describe a little bit more in depth what the role of the guests are? How do they get their information when, say, I was invited to a party?
Oh, well, your biggest role is to just come and have some lighthearted fun. Just roll with it. If you're invited to a party, you will get an invitation, sometimes via email, sometimes via the post, however the host chooses to send it. But you'll get an invitation. It will describe the murder and who is murdered. There'll be a little bit of information on the person who is murdered, usually on the second page. And on the last page of your invitation will be information about you. Basic information that everyone would know from the novel, or if they studied the period of history for the couple of historical ones we have. Just where you fit in the novel, how you were related to the person who passed away, just general information about yourself. There's usually also costume suggestions. So more often than not, people want to do these things in costume and just have a little bit of fun with it. So your obligation is to show up knowing at least who you are. You'll come to the party, you'll be given information once you arrive at the party that only you know about yourself. So what dark secrets were you hiding during the novel that might give you, say, Charlotte Lucas, a reason to want to kill Mr. Darcy? Or what might Artemis have been thinking that might have led her to want to kill her father Zeus? In any of these. Your obligation again at the party is to just accuse somebody 3 times in each of the 3 rounds, and respond when you're accused and make a good guess and have fun.
In the rounds, there's 3 rounds. How do they collect the evidence?
Many times it's just an accusation. Someone will level an accusation. Well, I didn't want to bring this up, but you had mentioned this to me previously, or this had happened, or I had seen you doing this. Sometimes they actually will produce a clue, such as, this person sent me this letter, or this is a page out of a diary, or in Sense and Sensibility, if you're familiar with that, one of the characters, Eleanor Dashwood, is an artist and draws quite a lot. So there's actually a sketch that someone pulls out that she had made that might give a clue as to why she might have been implicated in the murder.
Are you working on any future plays?
Yes, I've just done my first test round, and I'm beginning a second test round of Who Betrayed Marie Antoinette. My daughter actually was interested in this because she's studying the French Revolution, and without getting too much into French historical detail, there was one particular instant as she and her family were trying to flee Paris that they were betrayed and captured. So I explored that a little bit. I've done one test round. Probably within the next month, I'm making some tweaks to the murder mystery. I'll dragoon all of my friends into doing it again and seeing how well it works. And then I'm hoping by the beginning, in another month or so, of having Marie Antoinette on my website and ready to go.
You mentioned Marie Antoinette, that was one of your future
Yeah.
future stories.
Yeah.
What other ones are you working on?
Well, I think I'll probably take 2 weeks off after I finish Marie Antoinette and kind of clear my mental decks a little. But there are 3 I'm looking at right now and trying to decide where I want to go. The first, many years ago, I did The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas for some friends, and where we murdered the Count of Monte Cristo, who murdered Edmond Dantes. And I would like to take that out, polish it up, and see, and maybe make that my next one. I love Dumas. But I'm also very interested in the idea of doing a King Arthur legend. I did that one many years ago, where Arthur goes off to Avalon at the end of his events, his legends, and then he's murdered in Avalon. And having the famous knights and ladies from the Arthurian legends show up to determine who murdered King Arthur, which I think could also be an awful lot of fun. And then the third novel I'm considering right now is an American novel, Edith Wharton's Age of Innocence, which is just an interesting era of history. It's right at the cusp of having just gone into the public domain. But it's the Gilded Age, the turn of the century, the 1900s in America, the Downton Abbey era on the American side of things. It's a fun era to think about and look at, and I would be interested in seeing what I could do with that, and just that it might be something very different than I'd done before.
Who, if anyone, works with you?
I am the original one-person show. Although I have a wonderfully supportive husband and children and family and friends, I am the person who does the writing and the research and a lot of the hosting and answers the emails, and jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades.
Yes.
Is there anything you'd like to add before we end our time together today?
We live in such a busy, crazy, chaotic world right now, and I'd like to put in a plug, if I could, just for reading in a good old-fashioned book. It's hard to find the time, and it's hard to slow down enough to read a book cover to cover and savor it and experience the wonder and think about what the different characters were thinking and feeling and why they were doing the different things they were doing in that novel. But it's an amazing experience, and if in solving these murders and having these events, I've led people to just savor those stories a little more, I think it's well worth it. And I like to put in a plug to just spend a good afternoon reading a book.
Delightful. Elizabeth Irish, thank you so much for joining us on Mary's Eclectic Interests. And thank you, audience, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time.